All right, it is 5:31 p.m. and we will officially begin. Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Fong and I am with the California Department of Conservation. And on behalf of the California Department of Conservation, the Natural Resources Agency, Air Resources Board, and California Environmental Protection Agency, we welcome you to the 9th Methane Task Force public meeting. We have a series of informative updates for you this evening and genuinely hope to hear from you later on during the public comment segment. Next slide, please. I want to first announce that Spanish interpretation services will be provided this evening by Zoom and by phone. I will walk us through a few instructions on how to use this service, and then I will have our interpreter, Gabriela, provide guidance in Spanish. To change your language settings, please select the interpretation button. This button is a global icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And once you click on that global icon, you can change it to the language that you prefer or are most comfortable in. And tonight you will have Spanish and English as your options. To only hear the interpretive language, click Mute Original Auto. And I now welcome Gabriela to share these instructions in Spanish.
Thank you very much. Buenas tardes a todos. El día de hoy estamos ofreciendo interpretación en español para esta junta. Para cambiar la configuración del idioma, por favor active el botón de interpretación que se encuentra localizado en la parte inferior de Zoom y seleccione el idioma que desee, en este caso español. Después que haga clic, si usted desea escuchar solamente la interpretación, asegúrese de silenciar el audio original. Gracias. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Gabriela. I will now review the agenda very quickly so we can get a sense of what information we have for you this evening. First, CalGEM and CARB will provide a recap of their joint Senate Bill 1137 public workshops held earlier this year, and their summaries of key frequently asked questions that resulted from those workshops. Then we have CARB, who will share an update on the satellite methane project and related community engagement efforts. Following this will be a CalGEM update on the state abandonment program. And the last presentation of this evening will be a status update on the potential amendments to the oil and gas methane regulation, also provided by CARB. Then we will transition to the public comment segment of our time together. And please note now, in which I will remind you again later, that comments related to tonight's presentation updates are welcomed, and we hope to hear from you. However, we will not be providing responses or answers to your comments or questions during this time, but we will be sure to provide you related information and other helpful resources. With that said, we will conclude tonight's meeting around 6:30 p.m. Next slide, please. I will now hand it over to my colleague Rohit to begin our presentations.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rohit Sharma, and I'm CalGEM's Chief Deputy of Operations, overseeing all 3 CalGEM districts. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the background and implementation of SB 1137, which took effect in June of last year. And this information was also shared during 2 public workshops held on March 19th and 20th, and attended by about 350 people. Next slide. So SB 1137 was signed into law in 2022, and among other things, established restrictions on oil and gas operations within 3,200 foot of sensitive receptors. That 3,200 foot area is called Health Protection Zone, which I will discuss in more detail in my next slide. So originally, it was scheduled to begin on January 1st, 2023. CalGEM only had about a month of implementation before the oil industry qualified a ballot measure for the November 2024 election. The ballot measure suspended implementation and prevented us from taking further implementation actions. Then in June of last year, the industry withdrew the ballot measure, making the provisions of 1137 effective immediately. Next slide. This slide lists a few other things SB 1137 requires from operators. That includes inventories and maps of their proposed operations, controls of sound, light, and dust impacts related to operations, offering water sampling and testing under certain circumstances, and development and implementation of leak detection and response plans, which is focus of CARB's rulemaking effort. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows a screenshot of CalGEM's health protection zone mapping tool, and we will share the link to this chat. This map is available to the public, operators, and CalGEM staff. Since the health protection zones are continuously changing as residential, commercial, and public space land use change, these maps are a useful tool which we update periodically. To fulfill documentation requirement under SB 1137, operators are primarily responsible for ensuring that any data they submit is accurate. So while these maps provide a helpful tool for them, they cannot rely entirely on them. These maps play a critical role in public transparency, as anyone can use them to locate the geographical area of interest, view the health protection zone information, and provide feedback. Next slide. The emergency regulations were originally adopted in 2023 to provide immediate guidance for SB 1137 implementation, and including things such as defining the starting and the ending points of 3,200 feet setback, and identifying various reporting requirements and information submittals for operators. Emergency regulations generally have 2 years limit, but due to the pause created by the referendum, the emergency regulations for SB 1137 will expire at the end of June 2026. Next slide, please. Here are some key future deadlines for SB 1137 implementation. The first one, the emergency regulation will expire on July 1st, 2026, and CalGEM goal is to have permanent regulation take effect on the same date, which we are currently finalizing. Deadline for submittal leak detection response plan is July 1st, 2028. July 1st, 2030 is when operators need to implement leak detection response plan fully. By July 1st, 2027, CalGEM will need to submit a legislative report to applicable budget and policy committee to implement the health protection zone. Next slide. You can visit CalGEM's public webpage on 1137 to get additional information. The link is on the slide, and you can find information like community engagement, on legislation effort, operators resources, and the new maps we created. We will share the link to the chat as well. Now I will hand it over to Louis Tinkler with CARB for their part of presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Rohit, and thank you to the Department of Conservation for hosting tonight's event. Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Dinkler, and I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of the Monitoring and Laboratory Division with the California Air Resources Board. The title of this brief presentation is SB 1137, Development of Performance Standards for Emission Detection Systems. So tonight, I would like to summarize some key information that was presented at a pair of public workshops held back on March 19th and March 20th of this year. Next slide, please. Existing oil and gas leak detection requirements. In order to provide context for SB 1137, it is important to note that oil and gas production facilities operating in California are currently subject to existing air pollution related requirements. As depicted on this slide, air pollution control districts rules have been in place for decades to control the release of volatile organic compounds and toxic air contaminants. In December of 2023, the US EPA amended their nationwide oil and gas rules to include more stringent leak detection thresholds and to include additional sources that were previously exempt. In 2017, CARB adopted the statewide oil and gas methane regulation to control the release of greenhouse gas emissions. So for leak detection and repair, the above rules require what is called periodic inspections using handheld instruments that are typically conducted on a quarterly basis. Over the next few slides, I will describe how SB 1137 differs from these existing requirements. Next slide, please. As Rohit mentioned a moment ago, Senate Bill 1137 establishes health protection zones around sensitive receptors located within 3,200 feet of oil and gas production wells and production facilities. Examples of sensitive receptors include residences, schools, hospitals, and businesses that are open to the public. Operators of existing facilities within a health protection zone are required to develop and submit something called a leak detection and response plan. Next slide, please. The leak detection and response plans are comprised of 4 key components, including a continuously operating emission detection system, an alarm system that alerts the operator when leaks occur, a response protocol for the identification and the repair of those leaks, and a notification to the community when leaks persist and cannot be repaired within 48 hours. The key point of this slide is to let you know that under SB 1137, it requires a continuously operating emission detection system that enables the early detection and prompt repairs of leaks that would otherwise go undetected until the next quarterly inspection. Next slide, please. Yes, also as Rohit covered in his presentation, the leak detection and response plan implementation deadlines for the oil and gas operators are established by law and are provided in this table. July 1st, 2028 is a deadline for the operators to submit their plans. July 1st, 2029 is a deadline for CARB and CalGEM to either approve or deny the plan. And July 1st, 2030 is a deadline for the operators to implement the plan, meaning that the emission detection system must be installed and fully operational. Under SB 1137, CARB's responsibility is to develop performance standards and to identify the chemical constituents that will be the targets for the emission detection system. So to do so, we are working diligently to develop a statewide regulation with an estimated effective date of January 1st, 2028. Next slide, please. For more information, including the entire workshop presentation, written responses to questions that came up during the workshop presentations, and other background materials, please visit our program webpage as provided on this slide and dropped into the chat. Also, please consider signing up for our listserv that's listed. The link is listed on this page and just posted to the chat. Please consider being notified of these opportunities to provide feedback on our regulatory proposal. For example, in the fall or winter of 2025, we are planning to host another pair of public workshops. So if you subscribe to this link, you'll be notified of those events. So at this point, I would like to pass the presentation back to Jamie with DOC. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lou and Rohit. Now, the second half of this update will consist of an overview of the key questions and answers resulting from the mentioned 2 SB 1137 public workshops held in March. During these workshops, participants engaged in dialogue with a diverse panel of subject matter experts ranging from CalGEM, CARB, and the water boards. And once again, if you would like to view the full list of FAQs, please visit CARB's and CalGEM's web pages by accessing the links previously provided in the chat. I will now turn it back over to Rohit to share an overview of CalGEM's FAQs. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jamie. So I will now discuss a few key questions and answers from the SB 1137 pre-rulemaking workshops held on March 19th and 20th, as Jamie mentioned. The most common topics raised in the workshop were health protection zones, questions related to permitting and operations, and water quality and environmental monitoring and related issues. Next slide, please. So these are few questions from the list of questions we received. The first one is, would residences located in agriculture or industrial zones areas still be included? And our response was, yes, residences located in industrial or agriculture zoned areas are considered sensitive receptors. The law did not restrict residences based on land use. While there are some zones limitations on residential uses, this does not prevent the establishment of health protection zone within these areas. The next question, CARB and CalGEM mentioned having data available on public website. How will this data be available? Real-time, weekly updates, monthly updates? Our response was that the CalGEM, WellStar, and WellFinder websites provide well permitting data in real time and are updated regularly. Continuous monitoring data will be shared with the public in the future. However, the details are not available yet. The next question, what does water quality testing look like in relation to large projects? What does communication look like? Our response was, CalGEM WellStar quality testing is required when an operator drills a new well, and they must notify property owners and tenants within 3,200-foot radius and offer water sampling. Samples should be collected before and after drilling, and the results sent to the property owner, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the State Water Resources Control Board, and CalGEM. Next question is, can an operator perform deeper drilling or slant drilling on an existing well within health protection zone? Our response was, a sidetrack or drilling a relief well would be related to safety or preventing a threat to public health or environmental. Next question. Do health protection zone apply to all types of wells, active, idle, orphan? Our response was, health protection zone applies to all areas within 3,200 feet of the sensitive receptor, including well types and production facilities, but excluding those related to underground gas storage. The last question we are going to share with you today is, what guardrails will be in place to make sure that any proposed replacement or relocation of facilities within the HPZ, which is health protection zone, is not functionally new construction? Our response was, CalGEM only allows new well drilling in specific public health, safety, or environmental cases. New production facilities are rarely needed without new well. So construction require an approved notice of intention that meets the exception criteria. Thank you, and I will now hand it over to Louis Winkler with the CARB to go over their list of questions.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, Rohit. Yes, during the two public workshops, we received a total of 17 questions that were directed to CARB. So tonight, I was just going to touch on 4 that seem to be global type questions. So the first one I'd like to talk about is listed on the screen. Question, are emission detection systems and alarm response requirements only for new wells? And our response is no, actually. New wells are they are not allowed to be developed within the health protection zone. So the emission detection system and alarm requirements apply to existing wells and existing facilities. Okay, next question. Is CARB planning to publish a list of approved technologies that meet the requirements of SB 1137? And our response is no. CARB will not provide a specific system approval, such as like a make and model of a monitoring system. Rather, as I mentioned in the presentation, CARB's role is to develop the performance standards that set the minimum requirements that the system should meet. And that's very intentional on our part because of the variety of operational configurations, and we do want to provide flexibility to the operators on which type of system they use. Okay, let's go to our next two questions. Okay, this is a good question. Will the development of the SB 1137 regulation align with the amendments to California's oil and gas methane rule that's also being updated? And yes, while each regulatory package is being developed by different divisions within CARB, both teams remain in close coordination. The oil and gas methane regulation rulemaking aims to update the California rules to make them as at least as stringent as the US EPA requirements. And you can think of SB 1137 as an extra layer of protection that is a little bit more focused on the chemicals of concern that could vary by region. And you're going to hear in a moment, later on in tonight's presentation, you're going to hear from Patrick from our Industrial Strategies Division, and he's going to talk about that rule amendment. Okay, our last question. Why are underground natural gas storage wells excluded from SB 1137? Underground natural gas storage wells and their associated production facilities already have a requirement for continuous monitoring under CARB's California oil and gas methane regulation. So they are already covered. So that does it for my 4 questions. I look forward to your comments later on in tonight's open session. I would like to pass it back to Jamie.
Wonderful. Thank you for your overviews of the key themes, questions, and answers from the SB 1130 workshops. We will continue hearing from CARB, but in this case, it will be regarding the satellite methane project and related community engagement efforts provided by Elizabeth. Elizabeth, when you're ready, you're welcome to begin.
Thank you, Jamie. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Shealy, and I oversee the research division at CARB. I'll be talking to you about the California Satellite Methane Project and related community engagement. Next slide. First, I'll begin with some background on the California Satellite Methane Monitoring Project. There's a strong interest in reducing methane emissions since it is a powerful greenhouse gas and the second largest contributor to climate change after carbon dioxide. While methane itself does not present acute health effects, we recognize its presence raises important questions about what co-pollutants might be present, especially if it is emanating from oil and gas or landfills. Because of this and its climate impacts, we are taking steps to address plumes. Next slide. Over 10 years and 4 airborne campaigns, methane plume detection was proven to be effective to detect methane leaks and support action to mitigate these emissions when used on airplanes. On the right, you'll see some example images of plumes detected in 2023. Note that these plumes were observed by aircraft. The colors represent the amount of methane, with red representing the highest amount and purple the lowest. Next slide. CARB now has a contract to acquire methane plume data, and this provides CARB with methane plume data from satellites on a regular basis. All data acquired will be made publicly available. Our primary goal is to use satellite data to support mitigation, enforce regulations, and protect public health. I want to note that CARB has included provisions for satellite remote sensing data in the oil and gas regulation and is considering similar provisions in upcoming landfill methane regulation amendments. Next slide. As part of the funding allocated by the California state budget for purchasing satellite data, $5 million was provided in the budget to support engagement with communities related to the upcoming satellite methane project. Competitive grant solicitation will be released by CARB in the coming months in order to begin the process of distributing this grant funding. The goal is to fund community outreach efforts to ensure these data are accessible, understandable, and useful to communities. We anticipate the grant may be managed by a third-party administrator that will award subgrants to and oversee community-based organizations in developing and implementing a community engagement plan. Help CARB develop protocols and mechanisms to inform communities when plumes are found, and provide training and help for communities on interpreting the methane plume observational data. CARB held a virtual public meeting to gather input about the grant solicitation on April 24th. Next slide. The virtual public workshop drew more than 30 attendees. Some topics that were discussed include selection criteria for the awardees and the community-based organizations, or CBOs, key elements of how the project will be managed, what the communication pathway will look like during the project, and what types of materials and deliverables we should consider. We'll accept written comments until we accepted written comments until May 23rd, and CARB staff are also available to meet individually with CBOs and others upon request. Next slide. So thank you for your time today. Here's some additional information, and I'll turn it back to Jamie. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that update, Elizabeth. Next slide, please. All right, I am happy to hand it over to my colleague from CalGEM, Robert Schaff, who is going to give us an update on the state abandonment. Robert?
Thank you, Jamie, and good evening, everybody. Today, I'm Robert Schaff. I'm the State Abandonment Program Manager for the Geological Energy Management Division of the California Department of Conservation. And today and tonight, I'm going to talk about the program itself and give you a little bit of background about what's going on out there, and then give you an update on what we've done and what's going to be happening in the near future. Next slide, please. So the state abandonment program deals with the approximately 5,300 orphan wells across the state of California that have been deserted. These wells become orphan when there's not a financially viable operator that can abandon or plug and seal these wells. And so it's left to the state then to abandon these wells. We've known about this problem for quite a while now, but in the past, we didn't have funds in order to address the problem. But fortunately, we now have state funds that have been allocated for this, as well as federal grants. And also there's industry funds that exist now that are going to be used to permanently seal these orphan wells across the state of California. Next slide, please. So the first phases of these programs are intended to address high-risk wells across the state. And they're the wells that bring threats to California communities. These are wells that are near sensitive receptors, which would include houses, schools, hospitals, anywhere where there's many people that either live or work on a regular basis. And this first phases will also include wells declared hazardous and wells that have had a history of leaks. We are also addressing wells that are near environmentally sensitive areas that could be affected if there were an oil leak from one of these orphaned wells. So that's the focus of the first phases of our state abandonment program. Next slide, please. So what have we done so far? This is the work that's either been completed or that's in progress now. We've completed our first phase of our HVI Cat Canyon project, which is in a field south of Santa Maria. During this project, we've completely plugged and sealed or abandoned 171 wells. And we've also removed the facilities and pipelines that were attendant to that production there. Near Santa Clarita, in operations that were run by Caltico and Century, we've abandoned 53 oil wells and the facilities were removed there. Just last year on Griffin Resources, we abandoned 25 wells that were actually within the city of Bakersfield itself. And these were wells that were near houses, they were near businesses, and they were a couple that were actually in park areas there in Bakersfield. These wells had leaked in the past and had exhibited high pressures at various times that had to be relieved to prevent any potential harm that could come to the public there. So these were very dangerous wells near people and parks. And we completed the 25 wells that were in that program in 2024. We started work at the end of 2024 on the Alanco wells in Los Angeles. This is a drill site that's shown in the picture here on this slide that's somewhat near USC and not far from downtown Los Angeles. Again, these are wells that have leaked in the past and has posed a danger to the community because these wells are very near houses and a school there. So we've started work on those wells. There was 21 wells that originally there to abandon. We've already abandoned 7 of them, and as well as 3 others, we've abandoned the oil zone down in place. So that work will continue out through the rest of this year, and we should complete it at the end of this year or sometime early next year. Next slide, please. Upcoming work that's going to be going on in the near future. The one project that on the left of the screen, the Mountain View project, that's our wells near Arvin and in the Fuller Acres area there. This is south of Bakersfield. There are wells that are now been deserted, and some of them have leaked in the past. And so this project is going to begin within the next few days. So we're really excited about that's moving forward. Canoga Park is in this old oil field with wells that are leaking, is actually in Los Angeles County, but near the community of Canoga Park, which is part of the city of Los Angeles. So those wells will start as soon as we finish the Alanco project in Los Angeles that I previously mentioned. Also starting this summer will be wells in the Oxnard area on wells that used to be operated by a company called Peak Resources. So those wells near Oxnard, we should be starting them within the next few weeks going forward. And also coming up later this year are wells in the Kern Bluff area, which is a field just east of Bakersfield. And these are formerly operated by Citadel Resources. And they're near houses that are not far from the field itself. So we're going to get started on that in the real near future. So as you can see from the update, we've made some good progress, and we're about to kick this program out into full gear now going forward. So we're really looking forward to the progress that we're going to be making in the next few months and going into the next few years. Back to you, Jamie.
Wonderful. Thank you for that informative update, Robert. Very much appreciate it. And now I'm going to hand it back over to CARB for our last presentation of the evening, providing a status update on the potential amendments to the oil and gas methane regulation. Patrick, when you're ready, you're welcome to begin your presentation.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Houlihan. I work in the oil and gas section at CARB. I do want to thank all those in attendance and everyone who worked on putting tonight's meeting together. I will be providing a status update on the potential amendments to the oil and gas methane regulation. But first, I'd like to give a brief background of the regulation. Next slide, there we go. The oil and gas methane regulation was adopted in 2017 as an early action measure for AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act. It was amended in 2023 to address the US EPA's control techniques guidelines so that could be included in the SIP, the State Implementation Plan. It complements air district rules that are in place for decades to control VOC, volatile organic compound emissions, and it addresses methane emissions that are not covered by those existing air district rules. And it is jointly implemented and enforced by CARB and the local air districts. Next slide, please. The regulation applies to upstream production and processing facilities and midstream facilities like natural gas transmission compressor stations and natural gas underground storage. As shown in the graphic, the blue squares represent the upstream sectors that are subject to the regulation. The orange squares represent the midstream sectors that are subject to the regulation. And the gray squares represent sectors where the regulation does not apply. Next slide, please. And here's an overview of the current requirements in the oil and gas methane regulation, which include quarterly leak detection and repair, otherwise known as LDAR. If you hear that term, that's what that stands for. Vapor control on tanks above an emission threshold, which is 10 metric tons of methane emissions per year. Zero and low emitting pneumatics. Additional monitoring for natural gas underground storage facilities. The measurement of liquids unloading and well casing vent emissions, and mitigation of remotely detected plumes, which is new in 2023, and that is the satellite that you just heard about. Next slide, please. Okay, so in December of 2023, the US EPA finalized the Quad OC emissions guidelines for all states across the United States. These guidelines are designed to drive further reductions in methane emissions from existing oil and gas sources. CARB is expected to meet the federal requirement by submitting a state plan no later than March 9th of 2026. And to accomplish this, we will amend the oil and gas methane regulation. And then also on the slide, it shows the compliance deadline for the affected sources, which would be March 9th of 2029. Next slide, please. Looking closely at the Quad OC emissions guidelines, they provide performance standards that states must consider as they develop their plans. Notable measures include requiring the pneumatic process controllers to be zero emitting, expanding LDAR to cover all components, including those in heavy oil operations, and expanding LDAR requirements for natural gas processing plants. So instead of quarterly, it would be 6 times per year. And then lower the LDAR leak threshold from 1,000 parts per million down to 500 parts per million. Next slide, please. In January of this year, the US EPA published a notice of reconsideration in the Federal Register with respect to 2 specific concerns in their rule, and they opened that reconsideration to public comment. Those 2 specific concerns include extended emergency flaring and reduced net heating value monitoring for certain control devices. That comment period has closed, and the US EPA's decision is currently pending. This reconsideration is not expected to impact CARB's rulemaking. The big one on this slide is the March 12, 2025 reconsideration. The US EPA announced its intent to reconsider additional parts of their rule, including the Quad OC guidelines. So far, no additional federal actions have been taken. Despite this uncertainty, CARB is actively tracking all federal developments and remains committed to moving forward. Our team continues to work towards the 2026 submittal deadline to ensure that California remains a leader in methane reductions. And then we have 2 question and answers. Next slide, please. So, of course, the question would be, what if the US EPA repeals Quad OC? We'll review our current rulemaking to evaluate methane reductions in line with meeting the goals of the 2022 scoping plan and also to be responsive to community engagement. Next slide, please. And this one comes up also with our stakeholder and community engagement. Will CARB allow alternative monitoring technology for LDAR? The use of OGI, optical gas imaging, a FLIR camera is being evaluated for use for natural gas processing plants and for heavy oil component inspections. And in the use of other EPA-approved technology is also being considered. The EPA will publish or has published on one of their websites a list of alternative technologies that they will allow. So with that, I will now turn the presentation back to Jamie.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. Thank you for the presentation. Now, before we transition to public comment, I want to share how you can contact the Methane Task Force team. If you have questions or comments following tonight's meeting and you would like responses, you would like answers, please email the Methane Task Force team at methanetaskforce@conservation.ca.gov. Similarly, if you'd like to receive updates regarding the Methane Task Force, you can email the Methane Task Force at conservation.ca.gov and request to subscribe to the Methane Task Force listserv. Next slide, please. All right, we have now reached our last agenda item of this evening. And as a reminder, your questions and comments related to tonight's presentation updates are very much welcomed, and I would like to hear from you. However, we will not be providing responses at this time, and we will be sure to provide you related information and other helpful resources. And as a reminder, I encourage you to review the lists of FAQs and the other links that have been provided in the chat. Okay, I'm going to briefly walk us through the approach and general guidelines for this segment. I will alternate between attendees that are here in the Zoom room and those who are joining us by phone. For those here on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function when you'd like to speak. And for those joining by phone, you will press *9 for English, or you will press *1 for Spanish. Each attendee will have about 2 minutes to speak. I will go in order of questions and comments received online and by phone, toggling between the two. If your 2 minutes are up and you would like to continue to share, use the raise your hand function once more, and you will rejoin the virtual line until it is your turn again, and I'll call on you. Please note that I will do my best with pronunciation of names, and if the name and/or title on your Zoom doesn't reflect how you'd like to be addressed, please let me know once you come off mute. With that said, we welcome you to share when you are ready. The floor is now open to you, and I would like to hear from you. So I see we have a couple of questions. One from an individual who did not list their name, and they asked, does this also apply to fuel distribution facilities for refueling local fleets? And I assume that's related to one particular presentation, so thank you for your question. The second question from Gavin Bruce, what kinds of rules or mechanisms are in place to prevent oil/gas companies from becoming insolvent and avoiding responsibility for cleaning up their former sites? Very great questions. Thank you so much. You are welcome to continue to utilize that function for any other questions that you may have.
Hello. Thank you for accepting my question here and my public comment. I first off wanted to thank you all for the updates, especially updates around the SB 1137 implementation and the California oil and gas rule. I remember in a previous methane task force meeting, I believe from August of 2024, we got a timeline with a few milestones, one of them being a public workshop in the Q1 of this year, as well as a SORIA that was going to be released. And the first draft of the oil and gas rule updates around May, so sometime around this month. I understand the federal regulations have kind of put a halt to the progress that y'all are doing, and wondering if there's anything that any updates that y'all can give us around when proposed SORIA or draft rule can be made, with the proposed updates that y'all already have around the heavy oil exemption and the venting at the wellheads, as well as some of the other commitments that y'all had. I think it's very important that not only these updates happen, but that the methane task force and all of the involved agencies communicate with each other, because it's very impactful for the on-the-ground enforcement. Not too long ago, at a location here in Bakersfield called the Mayor Equestrian Center, which helps folks and kids with disabilities with equestrian stuff, actually dealt with a leak coming out of a tank. And I really want to thank CalGEM, because I think they were out there within like 30 minutes of a report that was made, doing inspections with all of the equipment that they had, and they were very expeditious. But it came to my attention that the local air district, which is the liaisons for CARB on the oil and gas rule, weren't out there until 5 days later. The report was made on the 14th. They weren't out there until the 19th. And I think it's important that a lot of these agencies communicate to help bolster and amplify the capacity that they can use, and really work as a team across state agencies to properly address a lot of these leaks, especially the ones that are happening not only next to sensitive receptors, but next to places that are providing services for folks. So I would really like to, thank y'all for all the work that you're doing, but also ask if there's anything that can be done to help the agencies communicate better with each other, so issues like the one at the Mayor Center can be addressed properly, especially for the liaisons of the oil and gas rule.
Thank you, Cesar. And I apologize for not seeing your hand raised earlier. I didn't have a very specific window up to see the list of participants. So thank you for just jumping in and sharing your comments and your questions. I want to validate that it is absolutely imperative that all the agencies work together and have smooth streams of communication, and that definitely needs to be improved. So thank you for raising that point. And thank you for being here this evening. You are welcome to contact the email address previously listed on the previous slide, and we can connect offline. So thank you again for your input. And now I'd like to briefly turn over to our phone line and to our other interpreter, Aldo, to see if anyone is on that line and would like to share their questions or comments.
There is no one, there's no question right now on the phone.
Okay. Thank you, Aldo.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. I will come back to you momentarily to see if there are any questions or comments on the phone line. In the meantime, I will reopen the floor to the folks here in the Zoom virtual room. If they would like to share a comment or question, you can raise your hand and jump right in. I see Cesar has put into the chat asking the question, are the applications for the methane satellite project live for applicants? And I am going to trust that one of our presenters can connect with Cesar offline in response to that question in the chat. So thank you, Cesar. Any other questions or comments? Now is your time. The floor is yours. We would like to hear from you. And if you don't feel like chiming in verbally, you are more than welcome to drop your question or answer into the chat. Gavin, I see your hand is raised. Thank you for being here. You're welcome to unmute yourself and share what you'd like to share.
Sorry, I might have missed this earlier, but how does I haven't been on one of these task force meetings before, so I'm not sure what like the format is, but how do the questions go about getting answered after we ask them if you don't answer them on the call?
Sure. So we are taking close notes of what is being asked. And at the end of tonight's meeting, we will aggregate all of those questions to create a FAQ, which will be available on CalGEM's website, along with the recording of this meeting. Also, when you are able to access the PowerPoint that is published on the website, there are a list of different email addresses that you can contact if you have a very specific question. That would be best for someone either from CalGEM or from CARB. Does that answer your question? Did you find that to be helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Great, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. B. Lopez, I see that your hand is raised. You're welcome to come off mute. Okay, it looks like you put your hand back down, which is okay, but if you have a question or comment, you want to re-raise your hand, you're more than welcome to. I see Christian Bisher has raised his hand. Okay, I'll come back to you, B. Lopez. Hopefully you can unmute another time, and if not, you can drop it into the chat and I'm happy to read it. But in the meantime, I'll turn it over to Christian.
Hi, good evening. Christian Bisher, Central Valley resident, and I work with Central California Environmental Justice Network. So hearing that you might respond or list the answers to the questions on the website for this, I would be interested for COGR if we had heard early on that they were making an inquiry to see if they were going to pursue requesting the exemption for heavy oil still, but without that public workshop at the beginning of this year, we haven't heard any information. And so I think it'd be useful for us if we knew if you are doing work or have done work towards trying to keep that heavy oil exemption around, or if you've decided to go the route of the EPA guideline. That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. I appreciate that. B. Lopez, I do see you at the top of my list. I can ask you to unmute. Hopefully that will be helpful. Let's see if that works.
Hi, thank you. There was no microphone, but I'll wait for you to respond to that question before I ask mine.
So we're not providing responses to questions or comments this evening. This is an open opportunity for each of you to share, but there is no responses at this time. So you are welcome to share now.
You're not answering questions, but you have a Q&A, and so you're just looking for community concerns so that you can address at a later time?
Yes, we will gather all of the questions and comments that are either dropped into the chat or the Q&A to formulate an FAQ that will be available to the public.
And can you clarify, is this a public hearing? This is just a task force, like a subcommittee to CARB? This is a really weird format. I've never been in one of these meetings where you don't answer questions, but you ask for questions.
Yeah, I hear this is a new format for you. So yeah, this is a methane task force public meeting. We hold them quarterly. And again, we provide updates and then at the end allow an open floor for people to share. But rather than utilizing the full time to provide responses, we would rather have you utilize this time to share your peace of mind and provide an FAQ later on that we hope will be helpful.
Okay, I do not appreciate this format. Is this how every methane task force meeting is going to go?
Yes, and I'm wondering if you have a comment or a question that's not related to the format. I'd love to hear it.
I'm completely at a loss here now. I have a one of the landfills here in the landfill in Stanislaus County is looking to expand. I'm wondering what CARB's role is to prevent that expansion without an actual plan from the county that is going to outline how they are in fact going to reduce methane instead of expanding. Is there any current policy or enforcement that CARB can enforce in our county, here in Stanislaus County, to ensure that before they expand, that the county has an actual plan to divert green waste and any waste from the landfill? That seems like a disservice to the residents and neighboring communities. Expansions to landfills should not be approved without an actual need. And I don't see how the county would show a need unless they have some sort of study of how much they're going to keep out of the landfill and why they would need to expand. So if I can get some answers to that, that would be great.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. I appreciate your input, your comments, and your question. We will certainly bookmark that and keep that in mind. Thank you. I will now turn it over to the phone line to check in with Aldo if anyone is on the phone line with comments or questions.
No comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Aldo. I see a question that has just been posted, and it is from someone who has not listed their name, yet they are asking, when will the data from satellite methane project be made publicly available? How much of a delay can we expect between real-time readings and the data being made available to the public? Thank you for submitting your question. Are there any other individuals who would like to come off mute and share their comments or questions during this time? We have a few more moments. I see that one individual has their hand raised, but I don't see who it is. So if that is you, you're welcome to come off mute. I think it's Cesar.
Yes, thank you so much. I think my last question is if the governor can support or help protect California's climate leadership in any way by making sure some of these updates, especially to the California oil and gas rule, are made, despite any decisions made in the federal government that are, being stewarded by people that do not seek the greater good or protection of the environment at the moment. So I would like to know if there's anything that either community or the governor can do to help make sure that some of these updates are, that they happen sooner rather than later, to make sure that these sensitive receptors are protected from some of the current exemptions, like the venting at the wellhead, venting at the tanks, and the heavy oil exemption. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar. All right, it is 6:31. I am going to turn back over to the phone line just once more to see if there are any comments or questions.
No questions nor comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Aldo. All right, thank you everyone who is here this evening. I want to allow one more opportunity for anyone else who would like to unmute themselves and share their comment or question, or if you're more comfortable, you can drop it into the chat. And please note that all of the comments and questions that are being dropped into the chat, as well as the Q&A, will be archived and addressed later in regards to the FAQ. And B. Lopez, thank you for your question. So yes, today's presentation in terms of the PowerPoint slides, the recording, and the FAQ will be made available on CalGEM's website roughly a week after we complete our meeting this evening. All right, and if there aren't any other questions that would like to be shared verbally this evening, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. And on behalf of the California Department of Conservation, Natural Resources Agency, Environmental Protection Agency, and CARB, we sincerely appreciate you joining us this evening. We will update the FAQ and continue to provide relevant information as all things progress. Have a wonderful evening and take care.